November 2003, Tumwater, Washington. For over 100 years, this town had a heartbeat. It wasn't a human one. It was the rhythmic, industrial thrum of conveyor belts, the hiss of massive boilers, and the clinking of thousands of glass bottles rolling out every single hour. But on one Tuesday morning, that heartbeat just stopped. Imagine walking through a cathedral built of stainless steel and copper, a place where generations of fathers and sons worked side by side. The smell of malted barley used to hang in the air like a thick golden mist, mixing with the spray of the Deschutes River. And then, in a single moment, the machines went cold. The workers walked out, carrying their boots and their memories in silence. Today, the Olympia Beer factory stands as a hollow concrete ghost overlooking the falls. It's a 100-year-old empire left to rot. But here's the mystery that keeps historians awake at night. This factory didn't go bankrupt. It wasn't failing. People were still buying the beer. The water, the legendary artesian water that made Olympia famous, was still flowing just as pure as it did in 1896. So why did a multi-million-dollar industrial giant rooted in the very soil of Washington simply decide to die? How does a brand that literally marketed itself on the soul of the land become a hollow label owned by a corporation thousands of miles away? Today, we aren't just looking at old bricks and rusted tanks. We are uncovering the autopsy of an American dream. We're exploring the fall of the Olympia Beer factory and the terrifying truth of what happens to a town when its identity is deleted by a spreadsheet. This is the story of the water, the work, and the silence that followed.
The foundation built on liquid gold. To understand the fall, you have to understand the height. And the height of Olympia Beer started with a single, undeniable truth. It's the water. In 1896, Leopold Schmidt didn't just stumble upon Tumwater. He discovered a geological miracle. You see, the Deschutes River drops sharply over basalt rock here. It's powerful, it's cold, and most importantly, it's sitting on top of deep artesian wells. Back then, beer wasn't a global commodity. It was a regional lifeline. If you lived in the Pacific Northwest, you didn't drink national brands. You drank the land you lived on. In the late 19th century, brewing was about survival and geography. Transport was slow, refrigeration was a luxury. If your water was bad, your beer was trash. But Olympia had the water, naturally filtered through glacial rock, mineral-rich and incredibly consistent. The brewery wasn't built as a monument, it was built as a machine, a practical, utilitarian engine of the Northwest. By the early 1900s, this wasn't just a factory, it was the town's oxygen. If you lived in Tumwater, you either worked at the brewery or you sold groceries to the people who did. But then, the first shadow fell. 1916. Washington state went dry 4 years before the rest of America. Prohibition should have killed Olympia. Across the country, hundreds of breweries were smashed into rubble. But the Schmidt family did something brilliant. They didn't panic. They retreated. They made near beer. They made legal extracts, and they waited. They kept the pipes clean. They kept the knowledge alive, because they knew that while laws change, thirst doesn't. When Prohibition finally broke in 1933, Olympia didn't have to rebuild. They just turned the keys. While the rest of the country was scrambling to figure out how to brew again, the Tumwater plant was already rolling out barrels. This head start created a golden era, a period where Olympia became more than a drink. It became a symbol of Northwest honesty. No flashy celebrities, no gimmicks, just the falls, the water, and the work. But in this early success, a trap was being set. A trap made of the very thing they loved most, their connection to one specific place. The Golden Age, the Empire of the Northwest. By the 1950s, Olympia Beer was untouchable. If you walk through the ruins today, you can still see the scale of the expansion. New bottling lines, massive storage silos, modernized brewing vessels. The factory was a city within a city. This was the Golden Age. We're talking about a time when the working man was king. Shipyard workers, loggers, mill workers, they all finished their shifts the same way, with an Oli. The marketing was genius because it wasn't marketing at all. It was a statement of fact. It's the water. The imagery was always the same: snow-capped mountains, rushing rivers, and the pristine Pacific Northwest. Inside the plant, the culture was one of the legacy. It wasn't uncommon to find 3 generations of the same family on the floor at the same time. A grandfather in maintenance, a father in brewing, and a son on the bottling line. This created a level of quality that no machine could match. These people weren't just making a product, they were protecting their family name. But while Tumwater was celebrating its success, the world outside was changing in a way that would eventually make quality and heritage obsolete. While Olympia was focusing on its artesian wells, national giants like Budweiser and Miller were focusing on something else: chemistry. They realized they didn't need the water. They could take any city tap water, strip it of its minerals, chemically re-engineer it, and make it taste exactly the same in Florida as it did in Seattle. Suddenly, being rooted in the land wasn't an advantage, it was a logistical nightmare. The giants were buying television airtime, flooding living rooms with images of lifestyle and leisure. They weren't selling beer, they were selling the American dream on a national scale. Olympia stayed stubborn, they stayed regional, they stayed honest. From the outside, they looked unassailable. Profits were high, loyalty was deep, but the foundation was starting to crack, because Olympia was optimized for a world of places, and the new world was a world of networks. The slow erosion, the illusion of safety. The 1970s brought a quiet, creeping danger to the halls of the Tumwater plant. It didn't look like a crisis. The beer was still selling, but the rules of the game had been rewritten. Refrigerated trucking and interstate highways meant that a megabrewery in the Midwest could ship beer to Washington cheaper than Olympia could brew it next door. The moat that protected regional breweries for a century had dried up. Inside the brewery, the vibe began to shift. The old-timers noticed it first. Investment in new technology slowed down. Instead of buying the latest equipment, management started patching the old stuff. Meetings that used to be about how do we make the beer better turned into how do we lower the cost per barrel. This is the quiet phase of industrial collapse. The brewery wasn't being built for the future anymore. It was being preserved for the present. Leadership in Tumwater was caught in a loyalty trap. They believed that because they had survived Prohibition in World War II, they were invincible. They believed the people of Washington would never stop buying Oli. But loyalty is a fragile thing when faced with a $50 million advertising budget from a national competitor. Younger drinkers weren't looking at the falls, they were looking at the flashy commercials on TV. Olympia started to feel like your grandfather's beer. By the late 70s, Olympia found itself in a no-man's land. They were too big to be a craft or niche brewery, but they were way too small to fight the national titans. They were a local giant in a world that no longer believed in giants, only in global corporations. And that's when the suits arrived.